I was 63 years old when I realized that silence can look a lot like strength. My name is Susan. For most of my adult life, people described me as handling things well. I smiled when they said it, because it was easier than explaining the truth. I raised 3 children mostly on my own, not because their father disappeared completely, but because presence and participation are not the same thing. He worked, he provided, he was rarely home. So I became the steady one, the calendar keeper, the emotional anchor, the person who remembered everything so no one else had to. When the kids were young, there was no time to feel tired. When they grew older, there was no permission. I learned to function quietly. By the time my youngest left for college, my life was already arranged around absence. People asked how I was adjusting. "I'm fine," I said. That answer came easily. It always had. Years passed like that. Holidays were busy, phone calls were short, visits were polite. My children assumed I had settled into myself, that I enjoyed the quiet. I let them think that because correcting it felt selfish. Then one afternoon, something small happened. I slipped on the front steps. Not badly, just enough to scare me. I sat there for a moment, heart racing, realizing how quiet the house was. No one heard me fall. I stood up slowly and went inside. I didn't call anyone, not because I wasn't hurt, because I didn't want to worry them. That night, I lay awake thinking about how much of my life had been built around not needing anything, how often I had minimized my own weight in the world. The next morning, my daughter called. She talked about her job, her schedule, her stress. I listened. When she asked how I was doing, I opened my mouth to say fine, but something stopped me. "I'm tired," I said instead. There was a pause. Not uncomfortable, surprised. "Tired how?" she asked. I didn't know how to answer, so I told the truth. "I don't remember the last time someone checked on me." The silence on the line stretched. Then she said softly, "I thought you liked being independent." I closed my eyes. "So did I," I replied. After that call, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. I realized something gently painful. My children weren't neglecting me. They were respecting a version of me I had carefully constructed, the strong one, the capable one, the one who never asked. That version had protected them, but it had also erased me. I didn't know what would happen if I stopped being her, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending that silence was peace. After that call, nothing dramatic happened. No apologies, no sudden promises, just awareness. And awareness, I learned, can be unsettling. My daughter called again 2 days later, not with news, with questions. "Are you okay being alone all the time?" she asked. I looked around my kitchen before answering. The familiar table, the quiet clock, the chair across from me that stayed empty most days. "I'm okay," I said, "but I'm not complete." She didn't respond right away. I imagined her processing that sentence, trying to place it against the version of me she had always known. "I never thought you needed more," she said finally. "I taught you that," I replied gently. That conversation didn't fix anything, but it opened something. In the days that followed, my phone rang more often. Short calls, awkward pauses. My children were learning how to check in without a crisis to justify it, and I was learning how to answer without minimizing myself. It wasn't easy. Old habits don't disappear quietly. When my son asked if I wanted help with groceries, my instinct was to refuse. "I'm fine," hovered on my tongue. Instead, I said, "That would be nice." The words felt heavy, but honest. He showed up that afternoon, We walked through the store together. Nothing profound happened, but when we parted, he hugged me longer than usual. That stayed with me. I realized how many moments I had kept people at arm's length, believing I was protecting them. In truth, I was protecting my role, the dependable one, the unburdened one. Letting go of that role felt like stepping into unfamiliar territory. One evening, my youngest sent me a message. "Mom, were you lonely when we left?" I stared at the screen. That question had waited years to be asked. "Yes," I typed, but I didn't think I was allowed to say that. The reply came quickly. "I wish I had known." So did I. That night, I slept deeply, not because everything was resolved, because something had been acknowledged. The following weekend, all 3 children came over, not for a holiday, just dinner. I didn't over-prepare. I didn't manage the evening like an event. We'd talked about their lives, about mine. When someone asked how I was doing, I didn't rush to reassure. "I'm learning," I said. They smiled. Setting boundaries turned out to be harder than telling the truth. Truth opens a door. Boundaries decide who can walk through it. Once my children began checking in more often, something else happened. They began assuming again. Not intentionally, not selfishly, naturally. "Mom, can you watch the kids on Friday? Mom, can you drive me to the airport? Mom, you're free, right?" The requests sounded familiar, comfortable. I felt the old reflex return, the urge to say yes before checking how it would land inside my body. So I paused. "Let me think about it," I said. Those words changed the temperature of the conversation, not in a bad way, in a revealing way. Sometimes the answer was yes, sometimes it wasn't. And when it wasn't, I didn't explain myself into exhaustion. "I'm not available that day" became enough. At first, there were small reactions, surprise, confusion. Once my son said, "You never used to mind." He didn't mean harm, he meant memory. "I didn't used to mind ignoring myself," I replied. "I do now." He nodded slowly. That was the moment I realized something important. Boundaries don't create distance, they create clarity. With clarity came a different kind of connection. When my children came over, they stayed present, not rushed, not distracted. They asked me questions they had never asked before. "What do you want to do this summer? Have you thought about taking a trip? Is there anything you've put off?" No one had asked me that in years. One afternoon, my daughter brought over an old photo album. We sat on the couch, flipping through pictures. There I was, younger, thinner, always smiling. "You always looked so put together," she said. I traced my finger over a photo. "I was," I replied, "but I wasn't always inside myself." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I'm glad you're here now," she said. That sentence stayed with me, not because it was emotional, because it was accurate. I was here now, not managing, not minimizing, participating. I started doing small things just for me, a weekly yoga class at the community center, longer walks without a destination, saying no without guilt. One evening alone in my living room, I noticed how quiet the house was. But this time, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt intentional. I had spent years confusing independence with invisibility. Now I understood the difference. Independence includes connection. It just doesn't require self-erasure. As I prepared for bed that night, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Same face, same lines, but something in my eyes had shifted. I wasn't bracing anymore. I was standing. The balance didn't arrive perfectly. It arrived gradually. There were still moments when I felt the old pull, the instinct to smooth things over, to be the one who made everything easier. But now I noticed it, and noticing was enough to change my response. My children adjusted in their own ways. My daughter stopped apologizing for calling and started listening instead. My sons learned to ask, not assume. We were all unlearning something together. One afternoon, I sat alone on my porch with a cup of tea, watching the neighborhood move at its usual pace. People walking dogs, cars pulling in and out of driveways, life continuing without needing my supervision. For the first time, that didn't feel like loss. It felt like permission. I realized that for years I had mistaken being needed for being loved. They are not the same. Love remains when usefulness fades, and usefulness was never supposed to be the measure of my worth. I began making small plans again, not for others, for myself. A short trip in the fall, a class I had always postponed, afternoons with nothing scheduled. When my children asked what I was doing, I answered honestly. Living, I said. They smiled, not nervously, proudly. One evening, after everyone had gone home, I stood in my kitchen and thought about the woman I had been when I first learned to say, I'm fine. She had been doing her best with the tools she had. I didn't judge her. I thanked her because she carried me to this moment, and now I could carry myself. If you are listening to this and recognizing something familiar, if you've built a life around not taking up space, please know this. Your needs are not a burden. Your honesty is not selfish, and your life does not become smaller just because others grow independent. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let people see you clearly, not as the strong one, not as the reliable one, but as the whole one. At 63, I didn't fall apart. I came together, quietly, steadily, at last.